VivariumEquinox. 4 ones are 4, 4 twos are 8, 4 threes are 12,
receive 20 to 25 minutes of
4 fours are 16, 4 fives are 20. I think you could do much better.
Half of school leavers simply don't read books, and 1 out of every 10 rarely read newspapers or magazines.
With a regular rhythm, you will understand number much better. Is that clear?
Time absorbing information from a television than they do at school.
Page 30.
Never learn how to spell words until you know your ABCs.
A child spends 5 hours in a learning environment.
Stop. What's that? School's out.
There are better places to be educated than in a traditional classroom. Here is an exploration of some new ways to learn using computer technology in our schools. Touch a bubble to launch the program.
At the core of any learning experience is a person's mind.
I think learning happens not when one is focused on learning, but when one is not even aware that it's happening.
Change education is the integration of the computer and the television set, a fusion, if you will, into the system.
You can see where it's going. The issues are how do we utilize it for the benefit of all society?
Anything else right now in education is that children should be allowed to participate in the information that's part of their learning environment. They have to actually get in there.
It'll be easier for them to engage
Look at that.
sense of play. You can pull them through to all kinds of learning experiences.
I ain't scared, I'm prepared within my realm. No don't try to read me, you be back.
The question of whether or not something is fun for education is a kind of a false issue.
We're trying to give the children an extension beyond play acting into the world of what ifs.
As always, the best weapon we have is the one between our ears, providing it's loaded.
Is dimensionless. It's only human beings that give that form. And as
quick, get it, quick!
Christina Hooper-Woolsey is a cognitive psychologist. She designs interactive learning environments for children, combining computers with sounds and pictures.
Schools are a little tired. They're a little bit worn out from working so hard. They're worn out from not having money. But I think that it's going to become the case, or I hope it's the case, that we realize that's our primary resource.
Jack Taub was an early pioneer in the computer industry. Now he's helping to bring computers into classrooms around the world.
I think the education crisis is a global issue that will become much more severe as time goes on, because what is happening is the world is changing faster and faster, and things that we have to teach our children, you know, are coming along faster and faster, and yet we are delivering all of our education basically through a textbook. By its very nature cannot be changed.
Bob Abel is an award-winning filmmaker who has recently started working with multimedia computers. He has created programs based on Picasso, Tennyson, and Christopher Columbus.
In the age of industry, like mass production, which made America powerful and great and rich, stamping out students like we stamped out cars or television sets or widgets was the way to educate. In the 60s, we shifted from the industrial age to the age of information, but our education didn't make the paradigm shift. We're still stamping out clones who don't think.
I think that if you look at schooling issues, how to provide facilities that are safe, how to provide buildings that hold up, how to hire people, how to pay their wages, how to do all of those kinds of things, that's mostly what people in schools do, and it's a very, very hard job. But indeed, it turns out none of that really matters for some of us unless children learn, are educated, are delighted with knowledge. And we somehow, because of this institutional momentum, have built systems that aren't quite about learning anymore. And I think we're looking that in the face and we're saying, hey, we have a system that's not something that we just want to tune up a little bit. This is a system that may not be working.
Is it like this in England? I'm going to find out more about this.
Stephen Heppel is Professor of Information Technology in the Learning Environment at the University of Anglia in England.
We do have a crisis in education in the United Kingdom at the moment. It's a crisis of resources, it's a crisis of morale. Computers aren't going to solve that crisis, but I believe that if we get it right, then teachers are going to start owning some of the solutions that computers can bring into the classroom.
What does he mean by that?
We just got to look at the child as the ultimate consumer here, and we got to make the desk of every child an intellectual Disneyland, and every school has to become a magic kingdom. And you can do that with these existing technologies. There's enough technology in place right now, and electronic highways that can reach any child, any place in the world.
Hi, my name is Jenny Sagany. I live on the reservation. The place where I live is Kayenta, Arizona. My school is like any other school except we have Native Americans. We study English, math, science, history, Navajo culture. Most of it we learn on computers in computer class. I've been learning computers for 3 years. This year we're starting Logo Writer. Logo Writer is fun. It teaches you math and shapes and all that stuff.
See, I'm getting a color from the computer right here. Now I'm gonna make lines all over it. It's a long program. It's on a lot of fun stuff, like you can even type stories, make shapes, stuff like that on the computer.
I think children learn best when the educational program is tailored to their individual needs, and I think that the software we're using in the computers is a perfect tool to do this, because the students can work at their own pace. The ones who don't really understand the material already covered can work on what they don't know, and then the students who are a little bit ahead or who are more inquisitive can move ahead at their own pace, and they're not relying on me to teach to the middle the whole time.
In Kayenta, we've installed the first utility, and now we're starting to customize education to the individual needs of each child, so they don't have to move into the big cities and lose their roots and their culture. So that's the process going on now, to sit down and give them in Kayenta, which is probably one of the most remote or rural parts of America, give them the finest level of education available any place in America, but at the desk of the child.
We're playing a computer game. It's sort of like tic-tac-toe, and it really helps a lot. In French, it helps you understand, and it's kind of fun to play too. I think we like it, huh? Yeah.
The computers have really been a plus to the way I teach in the classroom. The software we're using expands the exposure that the kids get to the French language. It also provides interaction between students, which is a lot less contrived than it is when I set up reading pairs or conversation partners, because it's much more natural. Education outside of the classroom plays a very important role in the lives of these children. Not formal education, but education from the family about the culture, about the traditions.
Quick, let's go for him. Oh, what's that?
It's nice to know a lot of things about the Navajo culture.
The other day I went to see an old medicine woman. She showed me sand painting. What does it represent?
Well, it's a rainbow, isn't it? Did you see a rainbow out there at the Swallow?
Yes.
It's just because of this. For the other people, those sick people, when there is sick people, they ask them to do some ceremony for them. If they go near light instruction or something like that, that's when they do these things for them. Whenever you see it, you can pray to these things. Pray to it, and so that brings you Anything that you want, you wish for, just say. That's what our old people says.
Since the 1960s, Alan Kay has been a leading innovator in the field of personal computers. Today, he is particularly interested in learning and in the role of computers in education.
Often, the idea of knowledge is it's a kind of fluid that is in teachers especially, and can be transferred drop by drop from the full teacher vessel into the empty student vessel. And the idea is that knowledge has to do with a collection of facts, and facts can be expressed in English, and you can tell somebody a fact in English and now they're supposed to understand it. And in fact, it doesn't work that way at all, because as far as anybody can tell, what we have is learning as a process. And the best you can do trying to be a teacher is to be a facilitator of that process.
You get to see things and it shows you more about what happened.
An American reading the New York Times has to digest more information than the average person living at the time of Columbus got in a lifetime. So how do we take this information, a sea of information that we're drowning in, literally drowning in, and how do we begin to swim through it? We have to show people how to use information to think, and that's the great challenge for American education. And that is in fact what hypermedia or interactive multimedia, we ever call this new technology that we believe in so strongly, is all about. It's getting people to think, not regurgitate information.
Ulysses is an interactive computer program based on the famous poem by Tennyson. Using it, children can explore themes embracing literature, art, history, mythology, and popular culture.
A little prophet said, an idle king, by this still hearth, among these barren crags, matched with an aged wife,
I meet and dole unequal laws unto a savage race, that hoard and sleep and feed, and know not me.
Now, can you tell me kind of what that means to you?
I think it means that the king is very angry because not everybody knows about him, because nobody knows about him.
Mm-hmm.
And he feels like, I'm the king, why doesn't anybody know about me? I mean, I'm the king, I'm the most powerful person.
Right, exactly. Now, if I go up here and I click on Explore, and I look at this guy, Ulysses, maybe I can find out something about him that relates to why he was a hero. If I take a thing like the Trojan War here, maybe I can find out something more.
The story of the Trojan War was told in the great epic, the Iliad, written by the Greek poet, Homer. It is a tale of love and war. Long ago, a prince of Troy, Paris, eloped with a Greek queen, Helen, the most beautiful woman in the world. He took her back to Troy, a city by the Dardanelles, in what is now Turkey, where his father Priam was king.
Our children in America watch more television than they do time in school. So if they go to school 8 hours a day, they watch 9 hours of television, if you include the weekends.
When rappers get defiant, I ain't scared, I'm prepared. Within my realm, no souls are spared. Don't try to read me, you'll be baffled. Before you test me, you best be careful, cause you have no idea where I'm coming from. I be dropping rhymes on drums.
Poetry is rap and rap is poetry. You're trying to tell people what you've been through, how you are, what you've seen, how you react to different situations, and that's what it is.
So if you take the dramatic, compelling premise of television with full motion video and sound, the way our kids grow up, and put an educational database in a computer that will link into it, I think that's the future that will excite kids and change education in America.
'Tis not too late to seek a newer world. Push off! And sitting well in order, smite the sounding furrows. For my purpose holds to sail beyond the sunset and the bars of all the western stars until I die. It may be that the gulfs will wash us down. It may be we shall touch the happy isles and see the great Achilles whom we... That which we are. One equal temper of heroic hearts, made weak by time, fate, but strong in will to strive, to seek, to find. And not to yield.
The film sequence you just saw were random ideas brought by 3 children and 5 adults in a 48-hour period to what is Ulysses? And of course, it seems to have many different meanings. Are they correct? We don't know. But what we did do is get kids thinking, and we guided them to help get their ideas into this form. And that, for me, is the beginning, the turning place in education.
So what was it like? Is it good?
Well, it's much more complicated than learning in school, but I think it's a lot better.
Why?
You can feel it more. You can feel it more by looking at the pictures, and also reading it, and seeing other people read it.
Now at least I understand something about the poem. It's about heroes and what they risked their lives for and everything.
Let's go for her. She looks good.
The Rite of Spring is an interactive computer program designed by Robert Winter as a companion to the musical score by Igor Stravinsky.
Kelly, who's that?
Igor Stravinsky.
That's our friend Igor Stravinsky. Let's go look at some of our favorite places, okay? What's that? What's that symbol? Can you play the cymbals for me? Kelly, can you play it for me with Mr. Trumpet?
Robert Winter is a musician and a professor of music. He has designed interactive multimedia companions to works by Beethoven, Mozart, and Stravinsky.
It's easy to teach Beethoven and Mozart with a piano and simple things. But if you take a score like The Rite of Spring, this seminal ballet, I mean, the piece that really launched musical modernism, you just don't sit down at the piano and pound out tunes. Many people would argue there aren't any tunes in the piece, and that it really is not, hum in the shower kind of music. And it's a work whose effects really still reverberate through the music world. I'm interested in making this piece into something that a 3-year-old would find interesting. Let's go look at the percussion. Do we like the drums? The timpani? What do they sound like?
About this one.
Okay. Do you know how do these sound? Did we ever play these?
I know how to play that.
You know how to play that one, you sure do.
Then I know, go to toddler class.
At toddler class, they have those tambourines, don't they? The excitement about this multimedia technology for me is that one can take music by Beethoven, by Stravinsky, very difficult, for most people impenetrable music, and suddenly bring it right into a child's sensory sphere. Kelly, which is our favorite? When I created the Stravinsky, I thought one thing ought to be a kind of pocket guide. It's that kind of quick access to any major section of the work. But then people want to know, what was Igor Stravinsky's life like? What was the world like in which he lived? This is a question that has always been relegated to the little teeny type on the back of record albums. But now one can luxuriate in it. You can bring in pictures of Picasso and the Impressionists and the Fauvists and the Cubists and so forth, and bring all this to life so that before one hears a note of Stravinsky, if one wishes, you can be saturated by the world in which Stravinsky worked and lived.
Igor Stravinsky.
What about her? She looks good.
No, him.
No, her.
Compromise him.
The Visual Almanac is an interactive multimedia kit for teachers and students. It contains 7,000 pictures and sounds, relevant to subjects ranging from physics to politics and astronomy to anthropology.
I'd like to show you something that's really fun on this. If the black line goes up, it shows them going faster, and if it goes down, it shows them going slower. So right now it's going down. Oh look, it's going up. They're going faster. Now it's going down again, look.
We try to take real-world experiences, because this medium lets us do it, and from those real-world things to abstract elements that then can be played with, and then you go back into the real world. So that back and forth, these computers are wonderful abstraction machines. You can see that that graph is the same thing as that motion on a merry-go-round. They aren't one thing you learn in school and the other thing you play with in the playground. They are the same thing, and that integration, that understanding is what's possible when you put those together.
Can you do anything else with it? What do you like doing best?
Mainly the animal habitats, where I mainly like to look at different animals. And there's also an orchestra and this little kind of zoo thing.
Guff, guff, wang, wang, wang.
The Visual Almanac is something we built to give people so that they could explore multimedia. It has 3 pieces. The first part is the collections. The collections are the set of stuff. It's the things, the movies, the stills, the sounds that is your basic cadre of materials. The second part is what we call composition workspace. It's the place you take those, like on a workbench, and you put them together and you make new things, which we think is real important, making your own things. The third part are activities, and those activities give someone the ability to see the kinds of interactions we think are important and interesting in the multimedia area. Some of us only learn when we're having fun. And fun is not necessarily, you know, jumping up and down and waving your hands or whatever people do when they have fun.
Hiya.
But that engagement, that involvement, you can see it on a child's face when that child is involved in something. And that's what I mean by fun. It means that there's an occasion that you want to do more of. It's something that fundamentally has your whole person, your emotions, your mind, all of those things are in concert. And that's the moment when learning can take place.
So if we were going to program our way, it may not be happening here, but
You have to.
well, next time do one that's not quite so easy.
What should we do?
Let's play tennis.
How children learn is a subject that has fascinated psychologists and computer designers alike.
Like who?
Montessori, who is one of my favorite people in the 20th century, her notion was that one of the strongest drives that children have in learning is the drive to learn their environment. That whatever environment the children are put into is the one that they will try and solve. If you want children to really learn rapidly and powerfully, you should set up an environment that is rich, that their natural curiosity and drive will sequence them through. Piaget started examining children, and one of his notions is that children are not deficient adults, so that the purpose of school isn't to fix them from their deficiencies so that they now become adults, but in fact children go through stable stages. Children think about the world differently in each one of those stages. Harvard psychologist Jerome Bruner, followed on from Piaget in the 50s and 60s and did a series of remarkable experiments that seemed to show that we had multiple mentalities. He particularly was interested in what he called the inactive mentality, the one that's interested in doing things that you learn by feeling and touching your nose without looking at it and so forth. One of the reasons I associate myself with tennis is not because I'm a great tennis player, but because the inner game of tennis, as thought up by Tim Galway, had a tremendous influence on me.
Footwork learned a lot. By the way, your grip.
One of Galway's notions was, he says, the problem with most theories of teaching is that the parts of the mind you want to have learned don't understand English. So if you want to learn tennis the hard way, you go to a pro who will tell you how to hold the racket and how to move your feet. That can take months. But Galway has shown that you can learn it in a half an hour or so if you quiet the part of your mind that was going to try and interfere and take over and let the what Bruner would call the inactive mentality, the one that controls your body, be able to do what it's been doing for 20 years already, which is moving around in the world and seeing with the eyes and coordinating the hands.
Bounce, hit, bounce, hit, bounce, hit.
Long ago, Seymour Papert asked the question, should the computer program the child or should the child program the computer? And in the behaviorist way of thinking about it, the computer is a kind of a Skinner box that gets the child to react in different ways. So it's drill and practice in a variety of different ways. And Papert's idea was, hey, wait a minute. What we should really do is let the children build the programs.
Built-in programs? What's he on about?
There's an interesting contrast between the United States of America and the United Kingdom in terms of what's happening in computers. Over here, I think we're fantasizing to some extent in thinking that the exciting, open-ended exploratory work which our children are doing in classrooms is being reflected also in what they're doing on a computer screen. I think typically it isn't. And what's happening on a computer screen is often just tokenism, I think. In America, what's happened that's different to the United Kingdom is that they've been prepared to take risks with their learning environment. They've been prepared to fund big, imaginative projects that say, what does happen when we put a lot of computers in front of a small number of children? What does a technology-rich environment really look like? What happens in the children's mind? What are the issues of marking, of assessment? What are the issues of organization and management? What are the issues of curriculum continuity? They've looked at the big problems and they've solved it with big schemes.
Hey, he looks good. Let's get him. Hi, I'm Murphy Stein. I go to the Open School. It's in Los Angeles, California, United States of America. In the school, we get to work with a lot of computers, and instead of having to, like tiring your hand and trying to write all your stories, you can type it on the computer, and you get to work with programs that let you create interactive environments like you see on TV, and you get to express yourselves in this environment, and it's kind of fun. I like it.
The Open School for Individualization is a public school in Los Angeles, which offers a discovery-based approach to education. Every child at the school has a personal computer, thoroughly integrated into the theme-based curriculum. Anne Marion is responsible for the Vivarium project at the Open School. She designs programs that help children to construct their own interactive learning environments.
The Open School for Individualization in Los Angeles is a school based on the thinking of Jerome Bruner and the British Infant School. And we think it represents a mode of education that's moving away from the industrial age model of little desks and little rows and textbooks where all the children follow along at the same pace.
Okay, boys and girls, let's all put our hands on the mouse and see if you can move the arrow to the middle of the screen. This is the middle, Tiana, right there. Let's see if you can move the arrow. Okay, good. Now, let's see if you can move your arrow to the trash can. See if you can move it to the trash can. Are any of you having problems?
So some of your streets may match the black lines underneath.
What attracted us to the Open School were all the wonderful theme-based projects we saw at every grade level. One example is what they are creating at the 8- and 9-year-old level, which is a giant city. And the city is based on the square mile around the school, so it's actually based on a real site, but it's placed 100 years in the future. So the children are called upon to imagine what things might be like then, and they're quite free to change things, although they have to change things through a process of negotiation and actual constructed movement. They have to say, we built a mountain because we moved the dirt from where we made the lake. They actually did this one year, and they learned quite a lot about conservation of volume. They had no idea it would take so much dirt.
I'm trying to put together a city with the classroom, and I've got this piece right here that I don't know where it goes, but I thought I already put it down somewhere, but it doesn't look like it fitted. So we're trying to get everything together.
This kind of project suggests opportunities for learning like that, which you can't even imagine at the outset. It's so rich.
Cesare Pavese said, to know the world, one must construct it. This is something that Piaget would have agreed with, and Montessori and Bruner and so forth. It's the idea that we build things not just to have them, but to also learn about them.
The children are working on actual three-dimensional objects, and they're creating little scale model buildings, and they can see inside those buildings and imagine themselves living inside those buildings and walking down those streets. Now that's a capability which we do see on computers, but not computers for children. We see it on computers for computer-aided manufacturing and design. But we are thinking in terms of those sorts of computers to bring them into the classroom someday in the future. And when we do, how are we going to make them more easy for the children to use? And how are we going to put them into the context of a year-long curriculum? This is why we're looking at city building in this classroom. When we learn, we make pictures in our heads. Jerome Bruner calls it possible worlds. It's a natural part of the thinking process. Young children all do play acting. You can see them, I'll be the mommy, you be the daddy, I'll be the Batman, you be the monster. They move very easily in and out of these fantasy worlds. And all teachers of young children know this and make use of it in some way in the classroom already. We're trying to give the children an extension beyond the play acting into the world of what-ifs.
That's good.
And we'd like to give it to them beyond even just animation. We'd like them to be actually able to indicate what the cause and effect consequences are through programming them.
Today we're going to use the computer and try to get it to help us solve a problem that a whale has every day of his life. A whale is a mammal, so he has to do what?
Breathe.
He has to breathe. Well, a whale lives in the water. What does he have to do in order to breathe?
He has to go up to the surface.
He has to come to the surface. Does he stay at the surface all of the time?
No.
No. So if we were going to program our whale on the computer here, you'd have to think about what he needs to do in order to breathe.
How long can he stay under without breathing and then coming up to take a breath? We'll have to know where the surface is.
He has to know where the surface is and where the bottom is. He has to know
when to go up.
When to go up.
How long to stay up there.
Okay, so now when you go back to your computers, you're going to program this whale and you're going to write in some code and see if we can't make this actually happen. Okay? Great.
This idea of the computer as a constructive medium, and in fact it's not just a constructive medium, it's the constructive medium because it can simulate the details of all other material, including material that can't exist physically in this universe.
The world is always in motion, and yet in school we're limited because of money and our technology to pen and paper, which is very static. And the computer has the potential to do animation, music, and also to create the kinds of simulations that scientists use in their laboratories to model things like weather and population growth and economics or ecosystems, which is the theme we are using at the school. Our challenge is to create new tools for making it easier for children to create these models on the computer. Right now, it's much too difficult, and it shouldn't be.
Once upon a time.
Jill Wright is a storyteller and teacher at the Open School. She has created a storytelling program that the children use to make their own videos called Backyard Transformations.
Backyard Transformations is a story-making, story construction kit for children. And it's a series of keyframes on a computer that look like cards, like playing cards. Children can choose these keyframes, click on them, and they appear as a video sequence on a television screen. And then they arrange these sequences in their own little movies, and they bring down little cards and write stories about them, and they make their own movies. Voila!
Let's go to Mr. Knizard's store. This is Miss Fatty Poo. She is 85 years old. She has 1 dog and 2 cats. She lives in a big house so she can get around. Please slow down. The only place she goes to is Mr. Knizard's store because she loves him. But Mr. Knizard doesn't. He thinks she is crazy. One day, Miss Fatty Poo went to Mr. Knizard's store and asked him to marry her. But he said no, because he thought she was crazy. Boo-hoo! He doesn't want to marry me. Boo-hoo! He thinks I'm crazy. The end.
If you sit down in front of a blank page, unless your imagination is very fertile indeed, it may be difficult to begin. But if you're presented with a very evocative, moving image, it may be difficult not to begin.
Once upon a time, there was a giant lady who lived in the mountains because she didn't like children. The children never came near her house because if they do, she and her husband would eat them for her dinner. Children are wiggling in my mouth. She was running down the mountain to catch the children who came from the school. She was looking for her next dinner.
When children watch conventional television or when they play a conventional multimedia game, it's a very flat world. It has a point of view. And life isn't like that. So we had this little tiny camera about the size of my little finger. And we did a lot of filming from way up in the air and down among the blades of grass and very different kinds of shots, so that the children could create stories from several different points of view.
This is a little elf who is afraid of a giant. He is afraid that the giant will sweep him to death. He first peeps through the hole to see if the giant is there. Today he felt very brave, so even though he saw the giant, he went out of the hole anyway. The giant saw the elf. He decided to blow the elf away. He decided this because he knew the elf was afraid of him. The elf got so scared he died. The Giant and the Elf by Eleanor Boyd, 1990.
What you're doing when you're working with a computer, if you're programming, you're creating an imaginary world and inhabiting it. And when you're writing and telling a story, you're creating an imaginary world and inhabiting it. And this skill of creative imagination, it applies across the board.
He looks strange. Shall I pick him?
Michael Crichton is a filmmaker and writer. He is skeptical about the benefit of multimedia computers in the classroom.
What I think no one is dealing with this exciting technology is, how are you going to assess it? How are you going to say to some 13-year-old black kid, let's talk about your video. Let's talk about those images that you've chosen. Does this video rate an A or a B, or a C or a D? Now, I think there are ways to make those assessments and to talk to the kid. But it's going to require a generation of teachers who are knowledgeable about the visual paraphernalia of any particular time. And those teachers don't exist, as far as I know.
The general idea of what I'm doing is empowering children.
A good teacher opens doors.
We have some magnificent teachers in the world.
The best teachers have always been multimedia teachers. The teachers who bring in newspaper clippings, who bring in magazines, who ask you if you saw a television program the night before, who have asked you, did you see this in this movie? Did you realize that that related to a movie from the 1920s and so forth? That is, they've always been teachers who have been unafraid of bringing in every kind of visual and oral and sensory stimulus that's possible.
No, let's click at the logo
of Cardfield FD, then show. I've been teaching 22 years, and 8 years ago I put my first hands on a computer, and from that day on my life has changed. I am a better teacher for it because I have gone exploring again. I stopped sitting and doing the same old routine things. It has made me reach out and look for everything there is to do that I can bring into my children. The general idea of what I'm doing is empowering children. I don't want them to simply sit in my classroom and listen to me talk. What they have to say is extremely important. You could probably do the kinds of things that we're doing here in every school. It's a lot harder work, and the teacher has to put much more into it, but the rewards are incredible. The children learn more from each other in this environment than any place else.
What do you like doing best on the computer?
I like to type stories and paragraphs. Sometimes computers can be more interesting because, sometimes it's harder to work with computers than reading books.
We make pictures.
Hey, what's that?
This is a stack that I made about fish, and I hope it will help people learn about fish. And this is the skeleton of a fish, and I put this together with drawing tools in the program. It took me a little while, but it was pretty easy. Let's see an evolution chart. And let's go away. And then let's go to an overview of the stack. And let's go to sea life at different depths. And then so you're looking at a picture of a Cuban hawk. HyperCard is a program that I use to make what I couldn't make on paper, or I could have, but it would have been a lot harder. And it's sort of like a book that's easier to make than taking it to a printing press and showing all the papers and everything. Because basically that's what it is, because you have cards like you do in a book, and you have pictures like you do in a book, and you can access them sort of like flipping a page with a book, only a little bit easier.
If you look at a book, any book, here's a book, the book that someone gave to me a few moments ago. I've never seen it before, I don't know anything about it. You start to realize that actually books have tremendous advantages. In other words, here's a book, I can see already that the data in this book is old. And so I can guess that this is probably quite out of date, whatever it is. I can also get an idea of the size of it. Now, if I open it up, I find that, that there are several ways that I can access this. The first thing that I would point out to you is that visually, and we're visual creatures, I can see where I am at any moment. It's very easy for me to stay oriented. I can also look in the front and see a table of contents. I can look in the back and see an index. I can, if I don't like to use those procedures, I can sort of flip through it like this and look for something that catches my eye. I can have a number of different ways of moving through this particular collection of data. Furthermore, if I'm in a library, I'm moving through a three-dimensional space. I am always oriented. I know exactly where I am. I know exactly how I'm operating inside the database. This simple way of interacting with knowledge has no analog in the digital world yet. No one has worked out a good way for individuals to move through electronically stored knowledge.
I like to think that the kids take from the book and from me as a teacher and then create something with that knowledge and information on the computer. The thing that makes the book different than the computer is the book is simply facts. The computer, the children are interacting with. They can make it do whatever they want it to do. It can come alive for them. And so it's a tool. It's a tool to give back to me something that they've learned in a really creative way.
I think there is a serious question here about what education is and what it is for. And I believe that when you step back very far from the process, that what you understand is that education is training and preparation for young people to enter a given culture. And traditionally, in every human society that we have known, that introduction and that education and that initiation, if you will, is carried out and supervised by older members of the culture. It seems to me that we are ignoring the vital and essential role of the teacher. And certainly when I look back over my own education, I mean, I can remember Miss Fromkin and Mrs. Bennett and Mr. McGrath and Professor Howells, and I remember them well and vividly. I don't remember the subjects they taught. I don't remember my classmates. I hardly remember where the schools were, but I remember those people. I remember, you know, what they were like, what they meant, what they stood for. My education is, in a sense, those people.
In this tool, some people see magic and they see ways in which people engage actively. Other people see them mainly as a way to transmit information, more in a hardware kind of a sense. And I think that the dream and the possibility is in that view of them as interactive situations for humans.
I think there are several reasons why it's important for children to be able to be the shapers of the computer material. And I don't know what order to put them in, but one of them is that we're living in the 20th century, not the 13th. Most people in this century are actually living in the 13th. Most people don't know anything about physics. They don't know much about politics. You know, there's so many things that have happened that actually are not part of most people's lives. And so I think one of the things that we're all interested in is just helping children live in the century that they were born into and not in some past century. Another one is just because it's fun. So why do you play tennis? You know, why do you paint a picture? Things that are fun are intrinsically worthwhile doing. You don't have to justify them beyond that. A third reason is that we are as smart as our symbol systems make us. Our intrinsic IQs are probably the same as they were 200,000 years ago. But if you lived 200,000 years ago and you had an IQ of 250, you would still be very, very far behind a person with an IQ of 100 living in this society and knowing what the society knows. So the important thing is that knowledge in a society that gathers it dominates IQ. And being able to manipulate that knowledge makes you the master of it.